listen in. Quick introduction, as Hans just said, I am indeed an expert in Generation Y after having more than a decade of a corporate career working with large global corporations in chemicals and pharmaceutical industry. So I have some affiliation to this notion of entrepreneurship. And then I decided to actually leave that corporate world and start my own business. So now I'm an entrepreneur for the past 18 months, still in a very new phase. And indeed, I decided to set up my business and be a specialist in Generation Y, and particularly in how to develop Generation Y for leadership assignments. So that's why I'm basically here to talk to you about the perfectly suitability of Gen Y entrepreneurs, or intrapreneurs, more to say, and are they or are they not perfectly suited for this role? As Hans said, we have a packed agenda. I hope you can see that on your screen. So what we're going to do first is have a very quick look at the typical values and attributes of Generation Y. And granted here, there will be some stereotyping, so some of this may fit to you personally, some other things may not, but we got to stereotype a little bit in order to talk about an entire generation. And then we want to look at defining entrepreneurship. What really is it? And what are the attributes that make entrepreneurs successful? I came to identify 21 of them, so we'll look at that very briefly also in the beginning. And then what we'll do for most of today's session is really focus on 3 key concepts that I have seen being a little neglected in the material that you may have seen or may find in your research. And those 3 key concepts are innovation, agility, and political savviness. So that's what we're going to spend most of our time today. I will give you practical tips and techniques for each of these skills, how you can leverage them, improve them, develop them. And also I want to introduce you to something that I just made up for today's session, which is called the Balance for Gen Y Entrepreneurs. So those are the things we have on the agenda for this session. Looking at Generation Y, we can't really start only with them without considering that there are other generations in the workplace as well. So if we're looking at society today in a very brief overview, there are 5 generations that we can identify. You see them here with their labels or titles. Some of them are also known by other names, especially Generation Y goes also by the millennials. You may hear or see that in some material, but it's exactly the same group we're talking about here. You see the birth years and also the age groups to make it simple. So this you don't have to calculate by the birth years. You can just look at the age groups today. And then there's a concept called the formative years, and I'll explain that in a second. So what we see here, Generation Y, really are people born between 1980 and 1995. According to literature or different research, you may see the birth years slightly off. Some people start already 77, 78. Some of them extend the millennials until the year 2000. But this is really the birth year range that I'm working with, and there is no exact science when a generation starts or not. It's always a fading process, which makes Gen Yers nowadays being between 18 and 33 years old. And the formative years is a period in life of each human being. It's been researched and identified by sociologists who looked at a time in life when people really form their typical values, not so much characteristics, but really what is the value base that they look at, their perspective onto life. And it's a time in your life usually between the age of 11 to 15. What happens here is that you're no longer a child, whereas children are mostly impacted and influenced by their family and their immediate circle. They realize what's going on just around them. And you're not yet an adult, where you really have the ability to reflect on what's going on, but you're in this kind of intermediate phase where you're subject to a lot of influences that are larger around and outside of your family and direct circle. Particularly that stuff like political influences, economic influences, social influences, historically what's going on, and what is it that, you know, kind of unconsciously or slightly consciously you absorb, and that forms your view, how you see the world. And that is very particular to each generation. Obviously the times, or here we see the years, that baby boomers or Generation X's, for example, had their formative years back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, the world was largely very different than what it was during the formative years of Generation Y. And that's largely the 1990s and the first decade of the new millennium. So that's important to keep in mind, especially when we're trying to address the question why Gen Y is the way they are. What makes them Generation Y? And what I've put together here on this next page is just a little overview, some images that I found, things that happened during these formative years for Generation Y, particular events, but also just things that in general happen all the time. And with media now making the world really a small place, Generation Y was the first really truly global generation exposed to pretty much anything that was going on around the world. We had access in real time, and Gen Y was able to see and perceive that. Again, this is before you had a conscious idea and before you would consciously reflect on what you thought about the world. This is more about how it shapes your values. So in a nutshell, really what we can say about Generation Y, especially if we contrast them to the previous generations, Gen Xers and also the baby boomers had a very different outlook on life during the formative years because of the influences that happened. And also looking at this page here, sometimes people say, oh, well, that's pretty bad. You know, it's quite sinister as a future, what we see here. We see that there are increasing natural disasters, there's environmental challenges, global warming is going on, school shootings have been in the media, a lot of terrorism, of course. So there's a lot of things that really deeply affect this generational cohort. Instead of turning their kind of fears about an unstable future into frustration, as for example the Gen Xers have done, Gen Y has really have the tendency to decide that they want to live life to the fullest. They don't know if they will have a future. They don't know what's going to happen to the world, to the planet, to their own lives. So for them, marketing slogans like, you may know, live for the moment or just do it, are really a definition of this generation's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And that's both in lifestyle and also in the workplace. They have high expectations. They've been raised by parents who really nurtured and entertained, protected their children, have provided for every need that they may have. So now coming into the workforce, they also have the tendency to expect the same kind of nurturing treatment from managers or from colleagues. And they actually tend to see the workplace as an extension of their family or a self-chosen tribe. Another aspect very important for Gen Y is about the balance between life and work. So what I like to say is no longer a work-life balance that they're aiming for, it's a work-life blend. They're really looking to bring that together. And a big part of the Gen Y formative years has been technology. So you see here all those famous logos of products or services that 10, 20 years ago, they were not even there. And nowadays, none of us can imagine life without them. So those are critical pieces that have influenced Generation Y and have led for them to develop typical value sets and attributes, which I try to summarize here. So this is really just, again, to give you a flavor what made this generation, and now if we're looking into why they may or may not be ideal candidates for entrepreneurship, this is what we're basing that on. Typical values that they developed due to the formative years and the experience that they have had. They value access and shared consumption. It's not about ownership anymore. Status, for example, is less important. Community and collaboration is really key, as well as diversity and authenticity. I said it, it's the first global generation that the world really has ever seen. Equality and participation, they want to be part of something, they want to contribute, that's important to them. Family and affiliation to this kind of tribe or a group of friends is key. They're very flexible and they value flexibility. They also value personalization. Everything nowadays is personalized. I mean, starting from the apps on your phone to the clothes you wear, really anything can be personalized. Integrity and transparency is important. Lifestyle, I said it, work-life blend. Also self-expression and fulfillment, as well as social responsibility and sustainability. Looking at the situation the world is in, we really need a generation of change makers. And so I'm glad to have you guys on the line because I'm sure that you're a part of this generation. The attributes developed out of that, some of them may come across as a little negative, and well, I put this on here because this is really the typical stereotype how other generations perceive Gen Y. And we'll see that some of these are very useful when it comes to actually developing entrepreneurial skills. So what really does it mean to be an intrapreneur? When I started this to prepare for this session, I actually decided to look it up and check what's the definition of an entrepreneur, and I found the Oxford Dictionary saying that an entrepreneur is a manager within a company who promotes innovative products, product development and marketing. I found that, quite honestly, a little bit tight as a definition. And just recently I found something else that says entrepreneur takes responsibility in large organizations for turning an idea into a profitable finished product, to to assertive risk-taking and innovation. And I found that a much broader definition, and I think that's probably the context in which we want to look at it. What separates an entrepreneur from the many productive employees that can be found really in any workplace is that entrepreneurs, it's almost like a lifestyle or an attitude or a philosophy. It's not a one-off. It's not, hey, I have an idea and now I want to really implement this. It's something that is inherent in them, and it's a motivational driver, intrinsic value. They really continue to take initiative beyond the required duties. Now, of course, as an organization, we would be blessed to have a lot of entrepreneurs with us. And so probably quite recently, corporations have discovered the immense power and potential in these people. So now we're actively promoting and encouraging entrepreneurs to innovate and create products and services for the company to integrate in their portfolio. And it has gotten quite a bit of attention. Essentially, we really want to bring it down to a very basic point. An entrepreneur is an entrepreneur on the payroll of an existing organization. And that was also the starting point when I looked into what would be the attributes that make an entrepreneur successful. I thought, why don't I just look at the attributes that make an entrepreneur successful? Because I just felt it was a little closer to me, given that my current situation is that I am an entrepreneur. So what you'll see popping up on your screen here are the 21 attributes that I identified. So I first looked at the characteristics that I would attribute to successful entrepreneurship. And then I wanted to deduct the same for the entrepreneurs. And I did a bit of research, so some of these things that you see coming up there is what I found in literature and articles. But mainly, really, I looked at my own experience over the past at least 18 months since I have my own business. And so there's been a lot of learning going on, very deep and steep learning curve. So a lot of these things is really coming from my own experience. It's not based on some specific model that I can refer to here. Interestingly, when I compared the two concepts, the entrepreneur to the intrapreneur, I didn't find a lot of differences. I really thought once I had tuned in on these 21 attributes for successful entrepreneurship, and I tried to weigh them a little bit and see which ones are key, which ones are maybe a little less important, or which ones are absolutely crucial. And then I looked into the entrepreneurship, and I found that it was very, very similar. In fact, I couldn't barely come up with any different attributes. I thought it is this is the attitude, this is the key, probably slightly different ways. Some of the more important aspects for an entrepreneur might be a little less important for the intrapreneur, and some other things come up as more important for the intrapreneur. So the one aspect that I found that was actually different was really the business savviness. And you should see now a pink circle popping up right in the middle of the screen. Business savviness, of course, is absolutely key for an entrepreneur. If you don't understand how to run a business, well, pretty much I'd say you have a problem there. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't need to understand how to run a business because you have all these other departments like IT and finance and marketing and sales and all these people around you. They do that for you. But the knowledge that you really need, how to maneuver those people, how to navigate that, is really the concept of political savviness. You may have noticed nothing else on the screen has changed. It's exactly the same 21 attributes. Slightly different weights in terms of, the size of words might have shifted a little bit, but really the key piece in the middle is political savviness. What I try to do next is I looked at each of the attributes of successful entrepreneurship and try to assess whether this would be a typical Gen Y strength or not. And again, if I say typical, I am stereotyping. So some of this might sound right for you as an individual. Some of it may not apply to you because we're all people, we're all different. But on average, or on the big, looking at the big picture, I created this balance for Gen Y entrepreneurs. And I ended up pretty much with the following distribution. So here are the attributes that I considered would be typical Gen Y strengths. These are flexibility, passion, initiative, courage, networking, innovation, multitasking, drive to make things happen, and building strategic partnerships. Those are things typically attributed to Gen Y as something that is natural to them, that they're good at, that they have an affinity with. So these would be considered Gen Y strengths. Of course, there were also a few things that I don't think are either strengths nor gaps. So you'll see them here appear in the center down at the bottom. Vision is something anyone can have. I don't think there's a particular leaning towards it or not for Generation Yers. Agility, setting priorities, and calculated risk-taking. those to me are neither particular strengths or particular gaps. But there are a few gaps really when I looked at the list that I could identify, and you see them appear right here. So what Gen Yers are typically not known for are attributes like patience, discipline, execution, resilience, perseverance, time management, dealing with ambiguity, and political savviness. So those are maybe some items that this generation in particular wants to develop. And also I want to already raise a flag here and say that even when we're looking on the left-hand side, looking at the strengths, the stronger a strength becomes, the bigger is the risk that this may actually turn into derailer. So if you're familiar with the concept of derailers, so attributes that you have that typically are strengths for you, but sometimes either under pressure or when they become just too much, then that really becomes a disadvantage for you. It's really like two sides of the same coin, right? It can be an advantage, but it can also become a disadvantage. And here's a story I can share with you, personal experience for me. You see passion is pretty high up here on that scale. And passion is something that typically a lot of Gen Yers would say they have. Passion for something that they love, that they enjoy, passion for an idea. And I think Hans said it in the very beginning. He learned, or he got to know me also as a very passionate person for my subject, which is Gen Y. And indeed, for most of my career, I've always received that kind of feedback, that I am a very passionate person. And so I thought, wow, that's a great strength to have. But really, earlier this year, I was attending a conference in Stockholm with a group of people, and it was around this topic of innovation. And I was volunteering as a kind of case study with some of my challenges that I experienced as a new startup entrepreneur. And it was a small group of people that had never met me before, and we had a little workshop, an hour, where they gave me feedback on some ideas I presented to them. And so I presented in my very typical passionate manner, and I thought, of course, this is the way to go. And at the end of that session, when I received feedback from those people, and they were very open and transparent, which I appreciated, a senior consultant who was certainly a baby boomer, maybe on the edge of a traditionalist, a gentleman who had been in business probably, I don't know, 40, 50 years. He said to me that he really enjoyed my presentation, and he thought that I was, presenting in a very clear and precise manner, all these things. But then he also said this. He said, but you really have to look out because you're very passionate. And, I thought inside myself, like feeling good already, growing 2 inches taller and thinking, oh, now he's going to say that that's great for me, and yes, I should keep my passion. And he really said, and that's what can be a critical aspect for you that can cost you some business instead of generate business. And I thought, I didn't hear him right. I was like, what? And really what he said is that my passion was so overwhelming to people that either they might shut off and not really listen to me until I present all my ideas, or they may even think that this is kind of a childish attitude, being so passionate for something and really not being professional about it. And that was such an eye-opener for me. And that's why I'd like to share that story with you, because I'm sure a lot of you are really passionate about what you believe in and the ideas that you have. But always be careful that passion is really a double-edged sword. And for some people, your passion might be overwhelming. And in that moment, it becomes a derailer. So having said that, let's look at the 3 aspects. I'm highlighting them here in pink. I thought, okay, let's pick one from each of those 3 columns. Let's look at innovation, at agility, and political savviness. And I picked those 3 because I think that these are 3 concepts that are easily misunderstood or just not well known. And we'll start with innovation. So innovation is really the action or process of innovating, more clearly, and it means making changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. Again, I took this from the Oxford Dictionary. So the key question is, what elements lead to true innovation? What kind of characteristics or attributes, again, do you need to have in order to be a true innovator? And a study was done earlier this year, actually was presented, the study was done last year by a company called Manas, and you see the link down there at the bottom. Later on when we share the slides with you, you can look this up and find more white papers there. And the study was on leadership and fostering innovation. And what they did is that they looked at what are some key skills and behaviors that lead to innovation. And they did identify actually 12 of them. I'll share them with you right here. And actually the size of the circles really is the weight of how important this attribute is. So they had ranked them from 1 to 12. And clearly seeing here the largest one, passion, interesting. Remember what the story I just told you? Passion really is the one key skill or behavior that a leader should display, or pretty much anyone who really wants to get some innovation into their business. So you see the other 11, in total there are 12, right here on this page. And when I looked at that list, really I couldn't help but think, oh my God, this is really almost like a typical description of Generation Y. A lot of it is very typical for them. So things like passion and enthusiasm, for example, even though I hesitate to say it's a generational trait, I really think it's more characteristic of youth. You know, any generation when they were younger, they were probably more passionate than later on in life. But still, it's an energy that companies can use and leverage to induce positive change. Generation Y is also known to be adaptable, flexible, open to experiment. So this generation experiences firsthand that the well-trodden paths that they inherit from their predecessors, I mean, let's face it, really led to economic, financial, political, and environmental crisis. That's why this generation is just so open to try new things. So for perhaps the reason that, you know, okay, we're Gen Y, we don't have that much to lose, Gen Y is really willing to take more risks and to embrace change for the potential and hope of making things better. And I think that's a really, really strong advantage that they have when we're looking at innovation. I mentioned it before, it's also Gen Y, the first truly global generation. So you guys appreciate diversity, you're natural social connectors, you choose collaboration across geographies and across traditional boundaries, you know, gender, ethnicity, culture, all these things are not really boundaries anymore. It's really part of daily life, and it's something that we appreciate. So typically Gen Y also, they tend to be self-confident, they're persistent, and really persistent to the point of, you know, being perceived as entitled, sometimes arrogant or obnoxious. But they tend to think differently than previous generations, and they're not afraid to challenge the status quo by asking demanding questions. And I think a lot of those things we see here in these 12 skills and behaviors that lead to innovation. But Gen Yers may need some coaching in other areas. But if we're looking now at the balance, here is how I allocated those 12 skills and behaviors. And I think clearly what we can see that innovation is a strong advantage in a typical Gen Y skill set. Again, not each of these goals here will apply to you as an individual. And let's look at the gaps very quickly, because this might be key. Follow through is not something that Gen Y is typically known for. You know, Gen Y is known for having lots of ideas, but not necessarily implementing them very well. Vision and foresight is something that usually needs a little more time to develop thoroughly. Active listening, well, you know, some people may be able to do that, but really it's also a skill that is typically not attributed to Generation Y. And also empathy is on here. I just want to say, you know, I'm not saying here with this illustration that Gen Yers are not really empathetic people. I think many of them are. However, if we're looking at empathy as really the capacity to recognize emotions and identify and understand someone else's situation, feelings, and motives, which really is what empathy means, then I think Gen Y has probably a lot of empathy, but the way that they express it is not always understood by other generations. So here I have put empathy on the gap side, because it's really more towards how do you express your empathy towards others and other generations so that they really actually think that you are being empathetic. And that's typically nothing that people would describe about Gen Y, at least not when we're really looking and focus on the workplace. So now what can you do if you want to improve your innovation skills or you want to leverage them? I put together 7 tips here, and let's just quickly have a look. First of all, yes, you can get a mentor to help you develop vision and foresight. Mentors are typically people with more experience than yourself, so just looking back and bringing this wealth of experience with them, they can probably help you build up this skill. You can also follow up with people during projects and keep everyone informed in a timely manner. Coming back to the point of follow-through, this is part of it. Push yourself to be more diligent, really be disciplined, and simply get things done. It's maybe not as easy as it sounds here, but that's something clearly we need to follow through, and of course do that without compromising quality. Learn to see the world through different lenses. This helps you really flex your empathy muscle. Obtain candid feedback and also be open to it, not just ask for it and then, you know, go like, okay, yeah, that's what you say, but really I think that I'm right anyway. That's not helpful. Practice your active listening skills, and then also leverage your strengths. You have a lot of those innovation strengths, and you can leverage them to really make this strong characteristic, something that you are known for in your workplace, and something that really can help bring your organization forward. If you have any questions related to innovation, please remember you can type them in on your screen and we'll pick them up at the end. So let's move to the next key attribute that we want to look at, and that is agility. So what is agility? Agility really means continuously learning something to do that you don't know how to do. And really, it relates to first-time conditions. That's important. It's figuring out something new or different so that you perform well. It's not just to manage somehow, but really to perform well under first-time conditions. And it's not the same as traditional intelligence, because we're measuring IQ. We know that that leads to analytical skills or acquiring new technical knowledge, but it's not really helping to acquire personal behaviors that are essential for long-term success. And the concept of agility, precisely learning agility, is also based on some research done by an organization called Lominger. They've been acquired by Korn Ferry, but there's a website, again, I provided here the link for you, where you can look up much more details on this. And the concept of learning agility is used by many, many corporations to actually assess their talent. So probably in all of your companies, no matter where you work, there's like an annual talent or performance review process. Your manager or some other people give some feedback about you, and somebody gives you a rating, and then you may receive a bonus, or you might just receive some kind of document that says how you're doing. And all of this is largely based on learning agility. So a person who has high learning agility is really somebody who quickly responds to a diverse, intense, varied, and adverse assignments, moving through different roles, for example, very quickly and picking them up with good performance under first-time conditions, and eagerly learns new competencies, always with the idea of providing top performance. And learning agility is really based on the rapid application of learning and thinking skills, of being flexible and open to change, so making very quick transitions, being interpersonally skilled, and also knowing yourself is very important as a key of high learning agility, and is able to deliver results by having impact and inspiring teams. So when we're looking at the model, again, I want to share the model with you here. There are 5 factors of learning agility. Those are these 5. In the middle is the self-awareness that's really key and center. And then there are 4 types of agilities that this research done by Lominger has identified. The first one is called results agility. I'm starting actually with mental agility. I should be starting over there. Mental agility means that you're comfortable with complexity and ambiguity. Somebody who's highly mentally agile, finds solutions to tough problems, knows how to think about something from different perspectives, is also a critical thinker, but is also able to explain their thinking to others. It's not just somebody high up in their ivory tower understanding everything but cannot really communicate with others. It's a person who's really curious to a fault. Looking at results agility, people who are high on that, they deliver under tough and challenging conditions. They also know how to inspire others to perform beyond the norm, not just doing the job, but really doing it well. They know how to build high-performing teams. These people have drive and personal presence. They're very flexible and adaptable, and they're very good at beating the odds. They are very resourceful if you're high on results agility. Then there's change agility. People who are high on that, they lead change. They are tinkerers, which means experimenting. They are never really satisfied. They always like to get it much better. They can also take the heat of resistance. It's not just that they can adapt to change well, but they're really leading the change with others. They can take the heat of resistance, and they know how to convert others also in followers of that change. They know how to deal with discomfort, and they are typically people introducing new perspectives and having this kind of passion for introducing new ideas. And then last but not least, there's people agility. People who are high in people agility, they are very self-aware. They're personal improvers. They're constantly aiming to improve themselves. They know how to respond in different situations differently. They're skilled communicators. They're very good at managing conflict. They're politically agile, something we'll talk about in a second. And they're pretty good at sizing up people, so they're understanding others very well, very good at empathy. And looking at this model, it's almost impossible to really make a valid statement about a generation's agility. Because again, this is very highly individual, this is very personal. Each one of us is different, and we have different strengths. But when I thought about this for the session of today, I thought there is at least one of these agilities that I think Generation Y has almost like a natural tendency to have more of it than other generations. And that's just simply because of the circumstances in which Gen Y grew up. Remember the formative years, remember the experiences and what happened in the world when Gen Y grew up. And I think given the speed of how things change, how the world develops and evolves, I probably think that we could say change agility tends to be a little stronger for Gen Yers than for other generations. And it's really just because Gen Y, they struggle less with change. They have more ideas because everything is still new for them. And also they are less established in their habits and less established in their ways of thinking. So when I looked at the balance, here's how I thought, it would be fair to put the agility bucket on my balance for Gen Y entrepreneurs. While most of it is pretty much in the middle, people agility, results, or mental could go either way. I think that change agility has a slight dip, and you see the balance is shifted only slightly, but a little bit towards a Gen Y strength. Given this, what would be tips for you to really leverage your change agility or to build up and further improve on it? Again, here are 7 tips that I put together. One thing for you to work on your change agility is to speak up and share your ideas in a professional manner. And again, remember the example about passion versus professionalism. So present your ideas in a professional manner and in the appropriate setting. Pick the time and the location wisely. Seek out projects with high visibility so that you can really demonstrate your change agility in your organization and for people to really perceive it. Also, let me tell you that this Lominger people have done some research on the allocation of these 4 main factors of agility and which ones of these are hardest to develop, which ones of these are mostly present in organizations. And while it really depends also on your company culture, but overall, worldwide, and they've done a lot of research, involving many different organizations around the globe, it can be said that the agility that's toughest to develop is people agility. But one of the agilities that's least present in most organizations is actually change agility. So again, you as Generation Y coming up now as entrepreneurs within your organization, you bring this asset with you, which is almost natural to you, takes you less energy and effort to develop. Bring that to the attention of your organization so people see that it's a strength and it's something that they can use you and utilize your strength for the purpose of the organization. So for example, you can offer to take a leading role in a corporate change initiative. You can also help others through a major change, particularly those people who have a hard time and struggle with that. You can get coaching on change skills that you still want to refine, and also demonstrate that you can manage an innovation from idea to implementation. It's very key. Coming back to the follow-through or execution is not typically a characteristic that people would attribute to Gen Y and say it's rather not a strength. So demonstrate that you can do that. You're not just only great at having ideas, but you're really good at implementing them in a decent quality and also while energizing other people along the way. And do not neglect the other factors of learning agility, because all of them together are what make you strong and a high potential in your organization. Before we move on, again, if you have a question about agility, either specifically on change agility or any of the other ones, feel free, type it in, and we'll pick them up at the end of the session. With that, I want to come to the 3rd key aspect, and that is political savviness. And probably, I put it at the end, but really, out of those 3, it is the one that I'd like to mainly focus on, because I strongly believe that this is something no one really teaches you in life. At least no one really taught me, and it's something that's so key to your professional success. So what is political savviness? I tried to find a definition, and interestingly enough, there's hardly anything around, or it's different people having different opinions. But what I mean when I say political savviness is really, I mean the ability to navigate an organizational matrix, and not only just navigate it somehow, but really do it with poise and credibility. And how you achieve that is really identifying internal and external politics that are going on and that impact an organization and its stakeholders, whether they are implicit or explicit. So a lot of this is really not written anywhere. It's just something that's going on in the organization. You know it's there. Maybe you can't really put your finger on it, but we all mean, or we all know what we mean when we're talking about the organizational politics. Also, you know how to approach each situation with a clear perception of the organizational and political reality. That's definitely a sign of being politically savvy, and understanding different viewpoints and recognizing the impact of alternative courses of action. So political savviness really is a concept that I don't think people learn at university or college or during their educational years. However, when you start out and you don't really learn how to crack the code, In my opinion, this can make or break a career. Because if you learn how to do this well, there's nothing that can stop you from being very successful in whatever you choose to do inside an organization. If you don't know how to do this well, you will always have stumbling blocks ahead of you. So let's look at what political savviness means, or what kind of characteristics you need to have to be politically savvy. And it was interesting because I did look for a model and I couldn't find one. So really what you see here on the screen is something I created myself. And I thought those are all aspects that are key when it comes to political savviness. And it's really just put up here in a pyramid shape because I thought it was useful. It doesn't really mean that there's a weight over at the top, and the bottom. What I tried to do is like see what are the basic things that everything else is built on. So for me, considering basic is emotional intelligence, integrity, self-awareness comes back here, and also professional honesty. It's an interesting concept. I can tell you a little story again. It was one of my early jobs that I had as a team leader, and one of the feedbacks I received from my manager was that I was too honest with people, not only in my team, but especially managing upwards. And I was quite surprised at that time, how can you be too honest? For me, honesty is like a non-negotiable. You're either honest or you're not, but it was not anything that you could be too much of. And so what I learned from her is that she said, there's something called professional honesty. And what that means is that we're not asking you to lie, or we're not asking you to kind of be not honest, but it is the judgment or the skill to understand at what moment, how much do you reveal of what you're thinking, how do you phrase that, and basically how do you package the honesty and to whom you deliver it. So I think, again, for me, this was a key learning. That's why I like to share it, because maybe some of you may also struggle with this idea. You're very direct, you're very honest, and again, it's for me personally, it's a very high value. I could not imagine living my life in a dishonest way. But the concept of professional honesty is really a key cornerstone of political savviness. Build on those four aspects could be stuff like building alliances, not only just connecting or networking, it's really building strong alliances. An ally is somebody who stands behind you and goes after the same goal and objective and shares your vision. Identifying sponsors. Stakeholder management in general is definitely key, but also aspects such as delegation, diplomacy, and overall nurturing any type of relationship. And those are all aspects of political savviness. Now, how do you think this distributes on the Gen Y balance for entrepreneurs? I started out thinking, okay, this might be allocated quite equally. A little bit on the Gen Y strengths and a little bit on the Gen Y gaps. But really, when I allocated those, let's say, balls onto my balance, this is what I came up with. I could see that a few of these would be strengths, like building alliances, integrity, or nurturing relationships, because it comes with, or it mirrors the Gen Y values of relationships, for example, community, integrity, obviously, transparency, ethical behaviors, and the strong connectivity that Gen Y has. I couldn't really place delegation anywhere. I think, that's neither a strength nor the gap typical for the generation. But then a lot of the things that I identified as critical aspects of political savviness ended up on the Gen Y gap of the balance. And really, when I thought about why that is, I think I came up with three ideas. One is, lack of experience. Some of this really comes with professional experience. The more time you spend in the workplace, the more you learn about this, like identifying sponsors or stakeholder management. Some of it may also be a lack of self-awareness. That includes emotional intelligence, for example. Maybe a lack of coaching or mentoring. And overall, also lack of a traditional corporate mindset. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to go or to pursue forever, but we got to face reality, and reality is that most of us are working in organizations that have been around for quite a number of years, that have been set up and led and managed by baby boomers and Gen Xers, sometimes even by traditionalists. So people with a very, very different value mindset. And for them, the corporate mindset or the corporate culture and reality is very different than it is or may appear for Gen Yers. So things like hierarchies or status and titles, slow decision-making, are all things that we don't think are efficient. So we try to find ways to get around it or to improve them, but that really lead to the perception that we may or may not have skills as in stakeholder management, emotional intelligence, or even this professional honesty. So I try to come up with 7 tips again, but honestly, I couldn't limit myself. So here are 9 tips to become more politically savvy. I couldn't drop any one of these. I think they're all key. And in order to develop that skill, first of all, what you can do is observe people in your organization who understand the internal and external politics that affect your company. There are people like that, and you probably have no trouble identifying them. So observe them, see what they do, and watch it closely. You can also expose yourself to opposing viewpoints on particular issues. Really get in those conversations, get in those discussions, and always try to, could you argue for each of the viewpoints? Even if they're not your own, but could you find arguments for each of those positions? So flexes also your mental agility. You can identify formal and especially informal influences in the organization. Maybe find a sponsor for yourself. In your interaction with others, preserve a professional tone, and this could be hard for Gen Yers. Think about politeness and etiquette. It's not dead. We may think it's boring and old-fashioned, but it is important depending on the people you deal with. And really look after your decent physical appearance. I can't straight point towards that enough. A lot of people have this kind of rebellion against it. Whatever, doesn't matter how I look. I'm a good professional, so that's what should count, and I can perform and deliver. But really, for the perception of how others are even willing to consider you as an equal partner inside the organization, to be truly politically savvy, you also need to know how to dress. Build your reputation as the go-to person for something. So it doesn't matter what it is, but if you want to become politically savvy, it's really helpful. That's what I did in my corporate career. People really, no matter in which office around the world, they would reach out to me because they knew in a specific area they would get an answer from me. And instead of going to their local contact or somebody who's in a wider network, you know how these things go, or somebody who's a coordinator of something, but still they don't have all the answers. They may not know everything. And then people struggle with finding information or something that allows them to proceed with their projects. So I decided to become the go-to person in a particular area. And I had people reaching out to me, which helped me build credibility and really also helped me to build these relationships and alliances inside the organization. Do something to hone your influencing skills, always making clear what's in it for them, for the others. So if you're trying to influence somebody, if you're really truly politically savvy, you don't do that from your perspective, you do that from their perspective, and you always point out why it's good for them to do whatever you want them to do. Communicate in a timely manner. The preferred style of your stakeholder, that's also important. Identify the preferences of the people you're dealing with. How do they like to communicate? What's a good time to approach them? Is it by email? Is it by phone? Is it in a personal conversation? Are they morning people? Are they late night people? Are they, out of work people? Do you want to go for lunch or I don't know, a drink after work? And is that the right moment for you to come and bring a crucial message? All those are things that you can identify for your major stakeholders. If you do all this, you're also building trust. And the key in building trust is displaying genuine interest in others. So really, it's not just asking how you're doing and then, not even really listening to the answer, coming back to the active listening skills. Really be interested in other people. Really try to understand what it is they're saying. What is motivating them? What is driving them? What are their concerns? How can you alleviate their concerns and help their life get better? So you build, again, credibility and trust. Pay things forward. Don't always expect for somebody else to pay back to you, but be the one paying it forward first. And last but not least, I also think this is key, even while considering the politics, always follow your inner compass. We're all people, we're all humans, and there's something inside ourselves that knows what's right or wrong. So even if somebody talks to you about professional honesty or people expect you to be really political and diplomatic, if it really feels wrong, then don't do it. Don't try to kind of be a person that you're not. Don't try to bend yourself too much and really break to a point that you can't really look in the mirror anymore. In the end, you have to live with yourself, and you have to live with the person that you are and how you're perceived in the workplace. And I think it's important, listen to your inner compass. And work on the skill, you can develop the political savviness, but it's key that you're not trying to be a person that really you're not. Again, if you have a question about this, type it in the question field. And with this, we're coming to the end of the presentation, so I just want to share with you a couple of more overviews. What's really the concluding summary? For me, looking at what we just shared, what I just shared with you, having ideas is really not exactly enough. and it's not the same as successfully implementing them. So here there is creativity versus innovation. And I think if we're really truly looking at the Gen Y, what Gen Y is very good with is creativity, maybe not so much innovation in the sense of the follow-through and the execution of ideas. So build your reputation for getting quality things done. It flex your learning agility muscle, and it's really a lifelong journey. It's something that never ends. So the key point here is to know your strengths and to leverage them to outweigh your gaps. A lot of people always try to look at what they don't do right and what they are weak in and what they want to improve. But really, a secret to success is also to look at what you're strong in, what you're good at, and leverage that and build on your strengths. No one of us will ever be good in everything, but we all have a natural talent, and usually it's also something we enjoy. So focus on that instead of trying to just bring your gaps up to some intermediate point. Use your social currency, your natural talent as human connectors. Refine your political savviness and influencing skills. Really, that point should be, jump into big and pink because it's very important. Also, getting help and resources for your project is really more about the relationships you build inside your company and the trust that comes with it. And this is more important than really the quality of your idea. You can take a mediocre idea, but if you really get the right relationships behind it and the right energy with it, you can grow this into something really fantastic. So when set up properly, you have the resources of the corporation to back you, and that's a great part of being an entrepreneur. You have the reputation, the expertise, the finances, and access to the knowledge owners, the employees, the customers in your organization when you do it well. And then the last point, again, I think it's quite important to not neglect your day job. You may be an entrepreneur, and this might really energize you, and you have a lot of passion for your ideas. But poor performance in the role that you're actually being paid for will not really help your credibility as an entrepreneur either. So coming to an end here, what does the balance finally look like? Yes, there is some evidence for Gen Y strengths, making them ideal entrepreneurs. And I think overall the balance is slightly tipped towards the strength. There are a number of things in the middle that, again, are neither good or bad. But there are also a number of success factors that are really critical in order to be a successful entrepreneur that are less natural for Generation Y. So these are things that you would have to spend some time and some energy working on them. And as a prerequisite, really, it requires you to be willing to change. The decision to develop yourself and to make some changes, it's a conscious point. You want, not only wanting to change that, but really the decision that you're going to do it. And after all, it's really all about practicing it and getting some feedback for continuous improvement. Having said that, if you enjoyed this little glimpse into Gen Y, you can keep in touch. So we have a number of groups and options for you to exchange with other Gen Yers, but also with other generations. You'll find us on LinkedIn. We run a group called the Gen Y Lounge. It's an open group, so each one of you can just join. You'll find us on Facebook. We'd love for you to kind of follow us and give us your thumbs up. And also, we run a couple of accounts on Twitter. You'll find us at Gaia Insights and also Gen Y Lounge on Twitter. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. You have some contact details on here if you want to keep in touch, or reach out at some later point. Feel free to do that. And really, my last thing that I want to say is, personally, I think that corporations and organizations can use any help that they can get to improve the world that we're living in, and also to make, generally speaking, in a very idealistic way, to make the world a better place. And so I just want to send this message out to you as Gen Yers, go out and really do that. Turn this world into a better place as successful entrepreneurs. Thank you. And with that, I'll ask Hans if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Martina, very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I very much liked to, at least maybe I'm a bit biased, but I like to conclude that yes, Gen Y is perfectly suited, and we need to learn really some things. And then that's also basically what sa.am is offering. Our training is aimed at getting you excelling in your day job, so performing really well faster, so that you free up time and also build the habits to implement your ideas. So basically, what we're aiming at with our course is perfectly matched with what you told us about Gen Y. So I like this very much. Thank you for all the insights. Yes, I have a couple of questions, and I have one. The first question I would like to ask you is whether you could go back to the slide on learning agility, because just at that moment there were some streaming issues I got reported. So can you share with us maybe in 1 minute the importance of learning agility? And
This slide of the 5 factors?
yes, exactly, and what it also means for Gen Y.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so in a nutshell, the concept of learning agility is research-based. So there's an organization that did a lot of surveys on this and looked at a number of people around the world in different organizations, and they identified these 5 critical factors of learning agility. Learning agility is basically a concept that helps determine if a person, an employee in this case, has a lot of high potential to grow into more senior positions. And these aspects here all center around self-awareness. That's like the centerpiece of learning agility, but then there are 4 other agilities around them called the mental agility, results agility, change agility, and people agility. So I'm not going to go through the details again. I'll leave this up on the screen so you can see it, the explanation for each of them. And what I did say about Generation Y is that really I found it hard to allocate these agilities to different generations because it's a very highly individual process. Some of us might be good in one versus the other, and it's not necessarily a generational piece. However, when I thought about this further, I found that looking at the formative years of Generation Y and how the world has evolved, the fast pace and the things that are changing so quickly with technology, I find that it's probably safe to say Generation Y is a generation that has an inclination or a tendency to have a stronger change agility than the other generations in the workplace. Change agility is one of the rarest agilities. It's harder to develop, and it's something that probably other generations struggle with. So for Gen Y to really build on that and see that as a strength that you can leverage, that you want to demonstrate in your organization, is something that can help build a successful entrepreneur reputation.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I understand, and I also want to mention that the recording of the session, so everything else you said previously, will be available to the participants. So, okay, maybe the first question I got almost in the beginning by Chris, and he mentioned on purpose. I think he's part of Gen X. He asked, aren't young people basically the same throughout all generations? So, is this wanting to change the world thing not necessarily for Gen Y? Is it just is it something for young people in general?
Yes, it's a very good question. So thank you, Chris, for asking that. And it's something that comes up a lot. When I, looking at it from 2 angles, on the more general angle, the research that looks into all these generational characteristics and habits really needs to make a distinction between what is based on these formative years, these influences and the values that evolve out of that, versus an age situation or a life stage situation. And what your question relates to is life stage. So clearly everyone who's a young adult has different focuses or focus points in life than somebody who is in their midlife or in a career, in a family situation, or somebody who is a retiree. So there are certain life stages or phases. And yes, you're right, this is more similar, and probably younger Gen Xer or younger baby boomer when they were in their early 20s also had a different focus on the life stage. However, this does not impact the piece that is around the values and around these kind of basic preposition, this perspective on life. And that is why I presented the formative years, because that's really the key. What everything about generational intelligence is built on is this period of formative years, and that was the same for a generational cohort that rose through the historical events and the development of the world in a similar time period. Now, the question specifically about everyone who's young has this idea of changing the world and, lots of ideas making things better. That's exactly what I said about the innovation part, where passion comes up really high as one of the, or actually the first key criteria to become or be a successful innovator. And that is why, yes, I would say that's not only Gen Y. There are a lot of passionate people of other generations as well. And especially when they were young, they probably had that energy too. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't leverage that energy, and we should be grateful for the young people that are out there. And maybe some of their ideas are not realistic, and maybe it's not, feasible, all those things that they want to do. But the energy they bring to it is great, and probably much more passionate than many of the older employees or colleagues could display for a change. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. And then the next question from Inge. Well, she mentioned that I'm kind of impatient. I think it's a good thing. My boss doesn't really like it. How do I manage this? So she also adds, I don't want to change my personality.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think here we're coming towards this professional attitude. So while no one wants you to change who you truly are, and maybe you are an impatient person, and I am too, so I can very well relate to that. But sometimes this is where the, let's say, emotional intelligence comes in. How do you assess your environment? When is the moment for you to really, truly be impatient? And when does your impatience really become a hindrance to yourself and for your own purpose? So whatever situation you find yourself in, make this conscious assessment. What is my goal in this situation? It could be I want to present, I don't know, in a team meeting, I want to present my project, or it could be I need to influence a stakeholder, and this person is rather slow, so I'm impatient, I want to jump to the conclusion and get ahead faster. And these are the moments where you can consciously pause and assess what's my goal. And now what is getting me to that goal, and not just me and blending out the others, but it's really how can I now get the buy-in from the other people to achieve the goal that I have? And the secret here is, or the kind of, secret sauce is, you're not saying or telling to someone else that this is how you're getting their buy-in for your purpose. You're positioning it in such a way that you're doing something, whatever it is, for them. What is good for them? And if it's good for them to be impatient and, jump forward and have progress, then go for it. But if out of their perspective, and that's the emotional intelligence, if your judgment says it's better for them to take it slower because they need more information or because they want to, walk away and sleep over it a night before they make a decision, if that's what gets you closer to your goal for your own project, then you have to have the professional and really emotional intelligence to let it go and to say, okay, I am impatient, but right here, this is not what gets me to my endpoint. What gets me to my endpoint now is the political savviness or the emotional intelligence to step back and take this break. And in some situations you will do that, and in some others you won't. So that's the key about the self-awareness. So congratulations, you have the self-awareness. You know that you're impatient. And now the next step is how do you turn that into an emotional intelligent part that helps you in navigating, the stakeholders and the people you're dealing with.
Excellent, Martina. Maybe I will, want to add my question to it, because does it then just, simply take some time, maybe half a year or maybe even up to 2 years, before you start recognizing this and also start being able to really act upon this kind of wisdom? Is it, does it take some experience to get there?
You can probably make the decision to change your own behavior pretty fast. What will take some time is for others to recognize it, especially if they've been knowing you or if they've been working with you already for a while. Mm-hmm. Any behavior change takes time to get noticed. Even if you change right now, and as of the next minute, you're going to change some of the things. The moment until people notice that, unless it's like really a huge thing, but otherwise it will take some time for them to also be perceived as something now that's permanent with you. And it's not just, today she, whatever, is tired, and that's why she's not so impatient anymore. And only after a while, people will realize, okay, that's something. Hey, wait a minute. Oh, she really worked on this, and it's I don't know, more convenient now or more pleasant to work with her. And what you can do to accelerate that process and to really get a better picture in terms of the perception of others, because really it's a typical blind spot kind of thing. Your self-perception is not always how others perceive you. Is really get feedback. So find yourself either your manager, if you have a good relationship with your manager, it's a great person to give you feedback and say, based on feedback I received before or based on some reflection, I decided I want to work on my impatience, because I believe, again, for the organization or for our project, for the department, I think it helps us to achieve our goals if I learn to manage this behavior better. So would you mind giving me some feedback on a regular basis if you notice where I am getting better and maybe where I'm derailing? Maybe is there something where people can give you a little sign in a meeting? No one else knows that, but they can just, lift a pen, and that means, oh my God, I'm rushing ahead too much. Or if you don't want to ask your manager, you can ask someone else, like a colleague or a peer coach. Would you mind giving me some peer coaching? I'm trying to work on this behavior, and it can be any behavior. And get somebody else honestly and transparently in a nice way to give you this kind of feedback, so you can kind of gauge if you're, moving in the right direction, because sometimes you believe you are and no one else notices it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good advice indeed, to ask a peer coach or anyone close indeed to help you with it. Maybe the last question I got from Deep in India, who say basically, I don't like networking, so political savviness sounds really far-fetched for me. What is your advice on that?
Okay, let me go back to the political savviness and see. it maybe depends a little on what you mean by networking. I mean, are you really a very introverted person, so you pretty much don't like to deal with anyone else? That is maybe not only networking, that's really a very strong introversion as a personality type. Or is it just really the networking kind of thing, you know, going to events and talking to people, doing small talk and building connections? That's the classic networking. So it could be either one of these two or maybe mixed. And clearly, yes, if you are not much into relationships in general, building relationships with people, the political savviness piece is very hard. But what you can do, and what my advice would be in such a case, what's especially important for you is the delegation piece and building alliances. And you don't need to do that. I mean, there's a little bit of investment. You've got to build an alliance with people. But if you're not the right person to talk to others, present to others, influence or energize them, go find somebody who's great in just that. Convince that person, bring that person on board with your idea. And then this one will be your ally. This will be the person speaking for you. And this is also where the delegation part comes in. See what you can delegate. If you're not very strong at whichever it is, and in your case, maybe it's the relationships part, find somebody else you can partner with who's very good at that. And then your emotional intelligence, I mean, great already. Congratulations to the self-awareness that you notice this is not what I'm very good at. You may be able to build on it and learn or train that to some extent, but you know, you will never be great in it if you don't enjoy it. If you hate doing that, you will never be great. So why would you waste your energy trying to build up something that's not your talent? Bring it to a minimum, and most importantly, use your energy to build on your strength. And I'm sure you have lots of other strengths. Which one of these can you identify that help you build an alliance, identify sponsors or stakeholders who can then basically do this type of work, let's say, for you, by delegating some of these people-intensive tasks or roles to other people. And that would be your way to getting around it. And that in itself is very politically savvy if you manage.